Listen, I'm a little bit ticked off right now, but Alabama's ego is about to cost us Ole Miss and LSU. That is about to happen.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. Subscribe there. We would appreciate it very much. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. And Alabama is getting ready. Their ego is going to get in the way and cost Ole Miss the LSU game. The Magnolia Bowl is on the chopping block, as is Auburn and Georgia, as is Florida and Tennessee, as is even Texas and Texas A&M, all because it got leaked out that the three permanent opponents, which obviously was more real than we thought it was, bothered Nick Saban. And he thought it was too tough for him. And he thought he couldn't handle it. So let's just go back in time just a little bit and look at what's happening. As the story comes up for this week, this is going to be the major story of this week. They're going to meet to resolve an 8 or 9 game football schedule in spring meetings. And make no mistake, an 8-game schedule means secondary rivalries like Auburn, Georgia, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Florida and Tennessee. Heck, South Carolina and Georgia. Even Ole Miss and Arkansas. Ole Miss LSU. Texas A&M. All of them are on the chopping block because that is what an 8-game schedule will mean. All in the name of another Georgia Southern or MTSU or, heck, Tennessee Martin being scheduled. Nobody wants to see that. So this all came about and got released by Brandon Marcello, and props to him for releasing this information and getting this in our hands, because if we got blindsided by this news, it would be bad. But Alabama is on the verge of a surprising endorsement for a conference game after Nick Saban voiced his frustration with the SEC's 3 proposed permanent rivals for the Tide, Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee, should the league expand to 9 games. Should the program follow Saban's battle cry, the Tide would join forces with at least 4 schools in opposition to the proposal for a 9-game schedule beginning in 2024. Sources tell 24/7 Sports. Administrators from 16 SEC schools, including Oklahoma and Texas, will gather Tuesday through Friday to discuss the 2 models. 7 schools prefer expanding the schedule to 9 games. That's half the league right there. If you're looking at 14 votes, that's half the league. But sources told 24/7 Sports this week, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and South Carolina, add Alabama to that, are opposed to the 9-game model. Now, one of those is not like the other. And I will say, it just needs to be said out loud. Georgia, completely silent on this. They would play 12 conference games right now. That is how secure they are in what they're doing. Alabama is getting in league with Arkansas, Kentucky, State, and South Carolina for this. I understand Kentucky, State, and South Carolina. This whole situation between 8 and 9, the real thing is, even though more money than bowl payouts are coming in, is the Birmingham Bowl something that is an option for you in December, or are you 5-7? Is a bowl streak that big of a deal in this age of expanded playoffs? This was part of the deal whenever we took Texas and Oklahoma in the league. After it's happened, you can't have buyer's remorse and realize what this might do for what you're doing. You might have been the top dog before, but it's going to get a little tougher now. I mean, you're Alabama. You're the gold standard of college football. Act like it. Don't be afraid of a simple conference game and not scheduling a Louisiana Monroe, which beat you once, but this is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It goes on, by the way. The article does say The 8-game model does not protect ancillary rivalry games. Read this part carefully, like Auburn, Georgia, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Alabama and Tennessee, third Saturday in October. LSU and Ole Miss, Halloween, Florida, Tennessee, or the long-awaited renewal of the Texas A&M game when the Longhorns joined the SEC. These are all games that built the SEC. That it just means more thing that they like to crow about and how traditionally they try to act. These games made the SEC what it is today. If it gets rid of it and goes to an NFL-type model, it will fail. Interest will dwindle. You'll go down to a second-tier conference behind the Big Ten potentially. This is a horrible idea. 8 conference games. And I will say this over and over again. It is horrible. It is the worst mistake the SEC could make right now. I'm not worried about $100,000 in lost bowl revenue because you didn't go to Birmingham. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about one more thing being taken away from the fans that helped make them fans to begin with. If they try to make the SEC look very much like the NFL, it's going to get antiseptic. It's going to be like a hospital to where the feelings just aren't there. You're just watching it for the competition. All of the things that make us love college football are not an option. Not a thing that you can really look at because all of that is going away. Whether through the transfer portal and NIL, which they're asking fans to swallow at a very high level. The things that they were used to and that were fun, like National Signing Day, gone. Those things, if you take enough of them away, they will quit coming. They will quit paying attention. The things that are there that can grab the next generation of fans, going away. It's absolutely ridiculous. Any situation, this is perfect scheduling model, this 9-game schedule with rotating teams to where you play every 2 years between 6 teams and having 3 permanent rivals. For Ole Miss, that would be LSU, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. That's about as perfect as it gets. It's all because Alabama is upset with the fact that they're going to get Tennessee and Auburn. And it's not LSU. They don't mind about LSU. Either that or they're trying to position themselves to where LSU is on the chopping block, essentially, to where they get somebody else. I like the idea of horse trading a little bit, but what are you going to give them? Are you going to give them Vandy and take them away from Auburn, who has Georgia and Alabama every year? Is that fair? I don't think so. I don't think Zach Blackerby at Locked on Auburn would say that's fair. Alabama is supposed to be the top dog in college football. Act like it. Period. If Ole Miss, and I'm convinced Lane Kiffin, if you told him it was going to a 10-game conference schedule, he'd be all right with that. He would absolutely be all right with that. Kirby Smart, like I said, you could say a 12-game SEC schedule and Kirby Smart's on board with that. Nick Saban's upset about playing LSU. The fact that maybe, Tennessee is good for the first time, and Tennessee's won one time in 18 years. But Tennessee beat you one time, all of a sudden they're good. That's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So, meanwhile, 3 schools on the fence on the scheduling is Auburn, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. These are the 3 schools, and this is one of the reasons we're doing this video, is just so you can let it be known how you feel, one way or another. Just let it be known how you feel. Because Keith Carter, you know what? We'll talk about that in just a second. Right now, I do want to let you know about Built Bar, though. If you're looking for a delicious treat and don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. You got to try this if you're like me and you want to make a healthier snack choice, but you don't want to compromise on taste. I've got just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Puffs are healthy and taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing you won't even know they're good for you. And what makes them so good? Well, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate, for one. That's right, real chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. And I'm not sure how they do it, but it tastes like a candy bar. But it has amazing macros, like 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait for a box. For years, we've been telling you, go to built.com and put in Locked On 15 and have it delivered to your house. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club, but you can still do the specialty flavors on built.com. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puff. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. You will thank me later. Absolutely. All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow on the show. We will start moving into magazine season. This week was going to be all magazine season. Now it looks like it's going to be 8-game schedule week and magazine season. So tune into tomorrow's episode for that as well. All right. So where was I before? Ole Miss is on the fence, and you have a chance to deal with it if you're an Auburn fan, an Ole Miss fan, or a Tennessee fan. You need to let your athletic department be known that this is silly. Tennessee people do not want to lose the Alabama game. Ole Miss does not want to lose the LSU game. Auburn fans do not want to lose the Georgia game. I don't care what anybody says and how they try to spin it. They're not into losing those games. Period. But that gives us hope for a 9-game schedule. The fact that this vote has not happened yet gives us hope for a 9-game schedule. All of this is perfect. It's set up for a perfectly rotational, the best schedule that the SEC has had since the first split to divisions. When that cost Ole Miss the Georgia rivalry and the Tennessee rivalry, games that actually meant something to Ole Miss fans, just went away, and now look what the LSU game will be in 20 years. Think about LSU the way you think about Tennessee and Georgia, and that is what the LSU game will be in 20 years if the 8-game schedule is allowed to pass. So we are going to bring this up real quick. Let's see. So bring it up again. 3 schools, Auburn, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, and Vanderbilt, who has remained silent in this. And if Vanderbilt is not saying, hey, 9-game schedule's too much for us, the other ones, just kind of shut up at this point. They do think Oklahoma and Texas is supporting the model because they play it now. Administrators from Texas and Oklahoma will attend the meetings and for the first time next week, but are not allowed to vote. They should be allowed to vote. It affects them directly. They should be allowed to vote. You know why they're not allowed to vote? Because there are 2 votes voting an affirmative for it. So there obviously somebody is trying to sabotage this overall. It's a pretty bad situation. Now, Keith Carter on, I think it was Ben Garrett's podcast like 3 weeks ago. Keith Carter actually said that Ole Miss is no longer about competing, it's about winning. And that's an important quote because this is kind of a Fisher cut bait type moment for that mindset, because an 8-game schedule will be just about competing. It's about making that Birmingham Bowl relevant. It's about beating Louisiana Monroe as opposed to losing to, South Carolina. That's what that's about. So the opposite of that, winning, is not caring about your schedule. Doing what Georgia's doing right now. I've said this over and over again. Georgia does not care about the schedule. If you want to make it a 12-game schedule, all right, let's do it. The only ones that care about schedule are people that are not self-confident enough to handle it. And part of this is this narrative that SEC fans talk about how hard the schedule is in the SEC. Like, Ole Miss has a terrible schedule this year. No, Ole Miss plays a road game at Alabama and a road game at Georgia. The rest is just an SEC schedule every year. The non-conference schedule is not that tough. I do not think Tulane is going to be what they were in the Cotton Bowl last year. That running back is gone. Pratt's a good quarterback. Michael Pratt's a good quarterback. I do not think they're going to be at that level. I'll say that right now. Whenever we do the W's and L's in July, I'll say the same then. The only thing about this schedule that makes this schedule difficult is the road game at Athens. I don't even know if it's the Alabama game. I think the road game at Auburn might be tougher than the road game in Alabama. I've said that before. And it's important that Ole Miss fans get on board with this 9-game thing, because it is going to kill rivalries, and an already small fan base in the Southeastern Conference is going to get smaller. You want to keep Lane Kiffin? Don't do this. You want to go in and be a big boy and have a seat at the table, where if you look on these college football magazines that we're going to start going through over the course of the weekend, Ole Miss is picked third in the West in a relatively down year. You want that seat? You want to be a big boy, a top half of the SEC team? You do not want an 8-game schedule. It is all about self-doubt. All about self-doubt. It's all about how you view the program. And says everything. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk about why 8 games is disastrous. We're going to drill down on that a little bit, and we're going to talk about these rivalry games. It's just abhorrent. It really does make me angry. And anyway, happy Memorial Day to everybody, and I hope today is going smoothly. Take a moment to remember the fallen, because they're the reason I get to yap at you about an 8-game or 9-game SEC conference schedule and not worry about any repercussions whatsoever. So that's important. Just take a moment to remember that. Anyway, stick around. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first and listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, comment, upvote, all of that. It'll make us very happy. Join our subtext community. The link is in the description. If you do that, we don't get information. We're not a news organization. We're a commentary organization. We're a perspectives organization. But if we have something, we put it on that subtext first. It's only fair to people like that. And you can view it as a tip for the content that we provide to you on a regular basis. So why is an 8-game schedule disastrous? Why? Well, let's start with those rivalries going away. Think about on a Saturday afternoon, okay? It's not necessarily about who Ole Miss is playing completely, although that's the most important part of the day. I'm not saying it isn't for an Ole Miss fan. But you look down and you're like, what's the CBS game today? Oh, South Carolina and Georgia. Oh, I'd probably tune in for that. What's the primetime game tonight? Okay, that's pretty good too. And a lot of these rivalries are going to go away. And you look at Auburn, and Auburn, like I've had Auburn as a punching bag many times on this show. And I understand that. But I do respect the history and tradition that they do have. For instance, whenever this conference went to 2 divisions and the expansion of Arkansas and South Carolina came in, Auburn lost Florida, which is a very heavily played game. It was the equivalent of Ole Miss and Tennessee as well. I mean, there was games that were lost forever, games that made the SEC what it was when it was a 10-team league. Gone, poof, out the window. Now, in this next round, a mere 30 years later, we're talking about a much more severe cut. We're talking about games that could just go away and not become what they were. Talking the LSU Florida game. That's a game nobody thinks about, but it's a game people watch. Georgia, South Carolina. Heck, even Missouri and Kentucky has turned into a weird game. Arkansas and Ole Miss, every year gone. Poof. Like the vapor. Ole Miss and LSU gone. Texas A&M and Texas, not coming back. Missouri and Oklahoma gone. These are all major, major things that is part of the identity of this conference. And you want to mess with that in the name of what? Having an easier schedule whenever easier is always cyclical? 10 years ago, Florida was the Alabama of the SEC. 20 years it was Tennessee and Florida as well, honestly. 10 years before that it was Alabama. These things change. Just because they set up a hard schedule in 2024 does not mean it's going to be one in 2027. It's just a hard situation for me to swallow. And as you can tell by my voice today, I'm emotional about this. Absolutely. Because I have grown up and loved SEC football since I was 3 years old. Watching Steve Sloan play Tennessee. My first game that I attended in person was an Egg Bowl in 1982. The Mississippi State won. But I remember Ole Miss in Tennessee, in Jackson, hearing Rocky Top over and over again. And I get that Tennessee can drive you absolutely crazy. But that was special. It was fun. Seeing Auburn play when they're doing their little ripoff of Glory, Glory, Hallelujah with the AUBURN. Playing Georgia, and Jeremiah was a bullfrog. These rivalries that are entrenched, I mean really entrenched, like a century-old entrenched, does not need to go by the wayside because Alabama has a little bit of a scheduling alley at the moment. This isn't fair. This isn't right to schools with games that matter. The Ole Miss LSU game means more to me than any game on Ole Miss's schedule. And that includes the Egg Bowl. The game that I most want to win every time when the schedule comes out is the LSU game. The game I most not want to lose is the Egg Bowl. That's a different story. That's a different animal. But my favorite game, not the most important, my favorite game is the LSU game. The game's down at Death Valley. It's just fantastic. It's the way that SEC football should be. It's what it was built on. You are going to pull at the threads to eventually the whole garment falls apart. If you keep doing this. This is not about a schedule as far as being easy in 2024 or 2025 or being difficult. It's not about that. This is about making the experience great for fans. The fans are the reason SEC football is even a thing. If it wasn't for the fans, the SEC would be the Sun Belt. The Big Ten would be the power conference. It's all about the fans. Do not forget that. And as teams start recruiting nationally and foregoing their local area, as TV networks gain more and more control and less emphasis is out going to games, as stadiums compensate by raising prices on absolutely everything so their revenue does not drop down, each and every one of those, the people that lose are the local fans. Every one of those, we're asking you for one thing, SEC. And that is, do not take away what makes the Southeastern Conference special. They might not play for trophies every one of those games, but those games are watched by dang near everybody. And it would just be an absolute shame for those to go away. So I'll get off my soapbox now for a little bit. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow. We will start magazine season because we got them in. We got them in. We'll start talking about how they look as well as looking at recruiting. So we'll see exactly what happens. Anything pops, we will talk about and comment on as we always do. Anyway, happy Memorial Day. Hope everybody has a good day. Talk to your athletic director. Hotty toddy.